welcome back to Hybrid Theory. I'm Aurian Archive, and we're picking up today on an Xbox game. Right? I'll be playing this on Xbox. This is the Rift Breaker. But it's not what I actually want to talk about. I kind of need to do some maintenance, if you will, upgrading various items inside. I'm in the check our map here. I'm in the headquarters zone, so I'm upgrading some of the storages that I've already worked on research for otherwise. What I actually want to talk about, though, is something that I posted on Twitter. And no, I'm not going to the browser to bring it up, but okay, if you are a hardcore gamer, you probably are not aware of Barstool Sports. Probably never heard of them. Maybe. You probably never heard of Mike Portnoy, or I think that was his name. And you may or may not have heard of Business Insider. Now, the important kind of historical point of historical commentary to make is a number of you're looking for a polite way to say something, and there's just not a polite way to say something because there's not a polite way to say something, and the impolite thing to say right now is the name Peter Bright. If you don't know who Peter Bright is, well, I actually envy your lack of knowledge here. So to basically in relation to computer technology, Peter Bright was at one point a writer for Ars Technica. Now, if you are a hardcore gamer, you probably are very familiar with Ars Technica because they once hired a guy named Ben Kay to operate, run the gaming side of things. And Ben quickly made a name for himself as somebody who didn't actually know a single thing about gaming. He had no idea of the collective history of Nintendo. He didn't know that Nintendo had actually worked as an internet service provider. He didn't know about RandNet or the cell phone communications used for Game Boys. He didn't know that Nintendo, for all their faults in regards to electronic for Nintendo's reputation of if it's archaic, if it's inappropriate, if it's electrically inadequate for our purposes, then we want it. He wasn't really aware of or displayed recognition of this history from Nintendo. And it kind of set the stage for Ars Technica in general. The company didn't hire people who knew anything about the subject matter that they were hired for, and it just
base is under attack.
I could really go down a list here of every single clueless writer that the Ars Collective hired over the years, but then I'll basically be listing almost every single person they've ever hired, and that would make for a really boring video beyond me just talking. But it kind of set the stage for Peter Bright. Peter Bright was a Microsoft apologist, for lack of a better word. Peter kept talking about Microsoft, talking about Microsoft products, but he didn't actually know anything about the products. It very quickly demonstrated time and time again that Peter Bright was just a paid shill.
One
That
of our
was
buildings
it.
has been destroyed.
Tower
And
destroyed.
bringing this forward, if you will, there was
One
another
of our
name
energy connectors
around the
has been
same
destroyed.
time
Base is under attack.
as Peter Bright was and Ben K were making headways at Ars Technica by routinely posting stories and commentary that on subjects that they had no background in. They didn't know what they were talking about, and for a long while on Game Nikki and other news sites, I got a lot of mileage out of playing ping pong with their posts. They would post something incredibly stupid, and I'd shake my head and just take more time than I really have should, raking them over their coals. Okay, so flash forward. There was another name kind of mixed in with the lack of behavior. And that name was Matt Hartley, another person who was hired for various sites to give commentary, opinions, whatever on electronics and computer systems who didn't know a thing. In fact, at one point, there's a very clearly labeled vote for me where I just went out and stated Matt Hartley is a troll. That's his only purpose. The only reason why he's doing anything is he's being paid to, well, be a jerk. And having come from, and the reason why I'm going over this kind of history, because all of this is really a few years old. Why I'm going into this is that the various collection of sites actually had a little ring going. As soon as somebody was discovered to be a fraud, to be incompetent, to, well, to not be qualified for whatever job they were posting, you know, and if you provided evidence and, you know, you had to, at some point, the publisher has to make an example. Sorry, we've got to let you go. Too many people know that, that this isn't happening. Even if you got that going on, eventually they would wind up someplace else, and I kind of made a game of that for a little while, where I would note that this person is now writing for this company, or this company, or this company, or that company. And after a while, you begin to put two and two together. You're not necessarily looking for what the writer's doing, you're looking at somebody who's being paid to create a hit piece. And that's really where, from the technology side of it, you begin to realize you see patterns, you see repetitive instances of somebody who's, okay, what's our map for here? Plus 700 for a second. We're not actually losing any yet. Because, what are you? Oh, those were ammo factories. Okay, anyways, where I'm going with this is, at some point when you start putting the factors together and you realize that these people who are just routinely showing up time and time again in different places and different ways, and again, you notice patterns. You notice things that
its flight trajectory
start
very
to
close to our location.
register
Prepare for bombardment.
and over again. And that really leads us. The point here is eventually you realize you're looking at hit point artists. You're not looking at somebody who's or sorry, not hit point artist.
Evasive maneuvers, Mr.
piece
Riggs.
artist.
Base.
It's a comment. Anyways, when you begin to realize that you're really just looking at headpiece artists, it becomes one of those when you see it, you can't unsee it. You can't unsee a headpiece. You can't unsee writers who were bouncing around from one publication to another. Not because they're any good, but because they're not any good. Because
The
they're
rock rain is
being
over.
paid
That was
to
intense.
just write a hit piece after hit piece after hit piece after hit piece. And that's kind of where this really, where we get to the Business Insider.
Carbonium
Because
storage is
Business
full. We should
Insider,
construct
as a
more storage
publication, enjoys a primary placement by Google, no friend of free speech or free expression. And yes, I realize I'm saying this while I'm broadcasting on a Google platform.
Warning. A
Not
new
that I
group of
expected
hostile creatures is coming
see
from a
this.
nearby nest.
But Google does a lot of hand filtering. Google does a lot, and I do mean
A new
a
technology
lot
has been developed. New blueprints are available for crafting.
of.
Base is under attack.
They do a lot of. You will not be able to access this information. You will not be able to access that information. And again, it's once you see it, once you realize it, once it clicks that something is going on, that there is a pattern of just writers moving from publication to publication. Many who may not have a justification to be at the publication that they're at. And it really starts to come together. You can't unsee it. You can't unnotice it. It will always stand out that that person writes those kind of stories and they got hired by that publication. And then you start being able to note that certain publications always hire certain writers who always write certain articles. And then you can take that one step further and you notice that not only are these writers bouncing around from publication to publication writing thinly veiled hit pieces, you start realizing that they're being protected. This brings us back to
Ironium storage
Bright.
is full. Build more
Thing
storage
is,
facilities.
Peter Bright was a pedophile. In fact, he was actually arrested and hauled into jail. He may still be serving time. I don't know. I really don't care enough to look up somebody who I absolutely
Warning.
abhor
Hostile
and
creatures are coming
despise
from a
to
nearby
find
nest.
out
We should
what
go
they're
there
doing
and clear it out.
presently. And the kind of point here is that Peter Bright's predilections for pedophilia were not unknown. They weren't documented. There were a number of various reports, credible reports from people who had a good reason to say that this guy is scum that were ignored. In fact, Peter was protected. And this really links into the Gates and Ballmer era of Microsoft, where Peter Bright could say almost any horrible, inaccurate thing that he wanted to say because he was protected. He was promoting a specific socially conscious company of selling their products, conning other people into purchasing those products, trashing products, and basically, again, guy was just complete scum. And when he was finally found out, when evidence finally arose that could not be ignored, or more precisely should I say, no prosecutor with an ounce about to need to get some towers out because Okay, anyways, uh, so you've got a record here of publications who are knowingly
Warning, a new
hiring,
group of hostile creatures is
knowingly
coming from a nearby
employing,
nest.
uh, people who are engaged in outright criminal, sexually oriented activities, and basically giving them free reign to do whatever they want. You know, at the very least, disturbing. At the very most, you just kind of have to sit back and ask, who paid for it? Who paid for it? Who protected a pedophile? I mean, really, who knew? Who was aware of the accusations? Who knew that they were accurate and decided, you know what, we're going to hire this guy anyways. And we're going to give him a platform, let him say whatever he wants to say. And then when it's found out, when it's brought into light, it cannot be ignored. You say, oh, we didn't have any idea. We didn't know that he was doing this. We didn't know that he was a problem. No, you did. You had lots of indications. You had lots of evidence being given over multiple years. Trying to say that you weren't aware of Peter Bright's alternate identity is a hard sell at best, and a blatant lie at worst if you've spent any time in any kind of technical publication. Just emails and chats are very difficult things to hide. And that brings us back to what was posted, or what I posted on Twitter. Because Business Insider, who enjoys the promotion of Google and the Google-approved news feeds,
Carbonium storage
ran a
is full.
hit piece on
Build
Mike
more
Gordon's,
storage facilities.
Wow. Every time I say that, I can't help but think of Carol Burnett and her Portnoy character. I know, little tangent there, but okay. Here's the thing: is beforehand, Business Insider ran their hit piece on
Hostile creatures are
Barstool
coming from a
Sports
nearby nest.
on the same day that
Don't let
Barstool
it clear
Sports
out.
was giving out their earnings. Well, there's, you might not think there's anything odd about that, but the day before that, there were a number of short sellers who engaged in massive short selling on Barstool Sports stock. And in the wake of the story on Mike Portnoy dropping on the same day that the earnings report came out, caused the stock to drop, causing somebody who was short selling to rack up a fortune. Ain't that interesting? It really is an interesting question. I mean, who paid for that? Where did that money go? Was there any communication between Business Insider writers and the CEO of Business Insider, who has actually been arrested and found guilty in a court of law for securities and exchange violations? That's not, you can look it up. Again, I'm not going to go drive to the browser and bring this up, but the CEO, the person who runs Business Insider, is in fact a federally convicted criminal. That's disturbing. On a whole different level, that's really disturbing.
Speed is increasing.
Okay. So he's a crook, so he's a criminal. Yeah, there's a slight problem here. And that, again, where the idea that
The wind is much stronger than
Ars
usual.
Technica, or the Ars family of publications, and their ever-expanding scope of rewrite about this now, that they weren't aware of Peter Bright being scum, being a aggressively hard sell to the point of
Warning. A
joking.
new group of hostile creatures
Gotta
is
be
coming from
joking.
a nearby nest.
Nobody can take you seriously if you say you weren't aware that this guy was a massive red flag in the making. Well, that's what they claim. What people claim and what actually happens aren't necessarily the same thing, are they? Anyway, so kind of the long take is as I posted on Twitter, being unaware of cellular communications and email communications, and understanding that the hit piece writers talk amongst themselves quite often because many of them do have to arrange stories. Yes, there is in fact evidence that Business Insider did knowingly run a hit piece on Barstool Sports for the sole purpose of financial gain. In
The wind
fact,
is
there's
calming down.
probably
Wind
even,
turbine power output is coming
at
back to
least
normal.
in 2 or 3 emails, evidence that Business Insider's CEO was primed and positioned to make a significant amount of his own financial benefit. In other words, the CEO of Business Insider stating, potentially for a record, may have potentially made communications looking for hit piece writers who would write an inaccurate and false story on Barstool Sports weeks before the story actually ran. This is, collectively speaking, known as grooming. When you are looking to manufacture a story and you need somebody to make that story become real, when you know for a fact that the story is not real and cannot be real. You need a patsy. And the problem, and this is one of the reasons why Peter Bright was eventually unmasked, uncovered, and hopefully gone, although given how easy or how difficult it is to find a patsy who will stay a patsy, whether or not they continue to stay gone is always an open question unto itself. But with that in mind, again, some of this really does come back to who paid for this, who communicated this, who decided that we need to hire a hit piece artist. Why not draw from hit piece artists that are, already in-house? And it comes back to, and this is kind of where I was going earlier between this is specifically Matt Hartley. Now, Matt Hartley was jumping from publication to publication because he had been outed as a troll. Everybody knew they couldn't trust anything Matt Hartley posted because his reputation was it was complete and utter junk. He wasn't ever going to post anything that was accurate or true. He wasn't being paid to do that. And that's a distinction when looking at the various, or varying, depending on how you want to phrase it,
Base is under attack. There is a breach in our walls.
Yeah.
Carbonium storage is full. We should construct more storage buildings.
Okay. Anyways, I'm trying to stay on track here. The jumping between publications, when you become known as a hit piece writer, it almost becomes actually easy, as you have a reputation, and this is how Gawker, which got its butt handed to it in court, and it was eventually taken down, kind of, and that the Gawker writers were basically just jumping from job to job. It's not that
headset just died on me, so I'm swapping, hopefully, to the EVGA. No, not the EVGA. I don't want to use the microphone array.
Ironium storage is full. Build more storage facilities.
Yeah, streaming difficulties.
Warning. Hostile creatures are coming from a nearby nest.
Okay,
we should go there
we should
and clear
be
it out.
on the... Okay, I'm showing that the razor is active, so I just leashed myself, and we're walking around. Okay. Anyways. Hit piece writers who roam around do keep in touch with each other. They do establish a reputation. And that was the first thing to note on the Business Insider story is who wrote it? Have they wrote hit pieces before? And the obvious answer is, well, most of Business Insider's postings are in fact hit pieces. I would be hard-pressed to describe Business Insider as a legitimate reporter on business events. Especially not with a CEO who's, well, already been found guilty of security and exchange violations as a criminal. Not exactly setting a standard for somebody who has earned a reputation as somebody you really want to pay attention to or take sound business advice from. So this coming back to the question that is raised, and the one that I raised on Twitter, is there an evidence chain showing that Business Insider knowingly committed criminal fraud in regards to Barstool Sports by running a story that they knew was false, that they planned from the start as a hit piece because they were looking to make a financial gain and thus committed a securities and exchange violation? And the answer is yes. Those hit piece writers do talk to each other. There was a recruitment for a hit piece writer to run a story on Barstool Sports. A writer was recruited
You should go there and clear it out.
to intentionally issue a hit piece that would be seen and pushed in order to give short sellers a financial gain, an illegal financial gain. Now, that's, disturbing in and of itself. Okay, but why leave? How can I be so sure that there is an evidence chain? Again, this goes back to every single hostile quasi-reporter that has ever engaged in batteries here. Alright, anyways. There does have to be communication to get stories straight. There does have to be somebody who is asking questions. There does have to be somebody who has to give a coached response. And there has to be somebody who says, you need to go and delete this evidence on your social media accounts. There has to be somebody who says, this is, you need to get rid of this point of data. You need to scrub this, you need to scrub that, you need to do this. There has to be some kind of prior communication. And if there's prior communication, there's only
real two ways of doing it. You either do it in person, which in this case you're now looking at credit card expenses for vehicles going from location to location. You're looking at security camera footage in gas
A new
stations,
group of
which
hostile
would be
creatures is
almost
coming from
trivial
a
to
nearby
uncover.
nest.
Uh, Other things that you could potentially be looking at is looking at train tickets or plane tickets. Uh, you're looking for unverified expenses. Other things that would lend evidence to say that there is a record is cell phone logs. Has somebody from this point ever contacted somebody from this point? Is there a prior existing communication? If there is, you've got a big problem. And that's the thing where Business Insider is right now. Potentially speaking, because there was short selling involved, because somebody did make money off of a knowingly false, demonstratively false story that was posted, given the nature of the predatory hit piece based writing procedures, finding somebody who will write a hit piece, will deliver on time and on schedule, who will overlook the various flaws in the hit piece to get the result that they are being demanded to get, and you've got the same kind of recipe that brought Gawker down. The thing is, when uh, Hulk Hogan, who was responsible for finding the right lawyer who took the hammer to Gawker, what the lawyer had almost a trivial time proving is the communication that was required between Gawker assets in order. I have no idea if this.
Ironium storage is full. Build more storage facilities. One of our buildings has been destroyed. A tower has been destroyed.
What building was destroyed? Oh, I'm taking an attack up there. Let's go deal with that. Okay, where am I?
Base is under attack. Warning, a new group of hostile creatures is coming from a nearby nest.
There is a breach in our walls.
Alright, 1 second while I deal with this. Let's get rid of those. Okay. Anyways, in the Gawker case, it was very easy. It was almost trivial to prove that the hostile actions, the overt hostile actions, the knowingly false statements, the knowingly false stories, that there had to be collusion, that the writers and the publishers had to both be in on the scam. And that's one of the reasons why Gawker went down so quickly when the case actually came to court, because there was no hiding or escaping from the fact that that there was collusionatory, not even sure I got that word right, that there was collusionatory actions between the Gawker staff, the paid writers, the contract writers, and the knowledge or the existence of that collusion, knowing collusion, was something that couldn't be gotten away from. It's who do you hire? How do you communicate with them? You have to have some, there has to be some form of communication in order for a hit piece story to work. There has to be somebody who is aware that what they're printing is a lie. Otherwise, they can't write the story in the way to make the lie believable. And it's the same thing with CBS, with NBC, with CNN. The lie is only plausible when everybody knows for a fact that they are typing a lie. It only works when
A new group of
other
suspects
suckers are
is coming
involved.
from a nearby nest.
Let's grab up some of this. Alright. And I think we'll actually leave some of those there. But what we will do. Anyways, that's why I went on Twitter and just outright stated that yes, there is an evidence chain, and it's not one that Business Insider can get away from or avoid. That there was collusion is not a question. That people were being hired and recruited to uh, paint a false story is not a question. The question is who paid for it, how did they communicate, how many people were involved, how many people were being paid out of the proceeds. That is to say, how many people who knew that there was going to be short selling, that there was going to be a hit piece to bring the values of the stock down, and how many people made sure that they would be in a position to take advantage of that information. Those are some interesting questions, and those are questions that, because of who Business Insider decided to target, they might actually
Looks
be
like the weather's
forced into
winding down.
answering in a
Wind is getting
court of
slower.
law. Because if you don't know much about Barstool Sports, Mike Portnoy is not exactly somebody who backs down from a fight. If anything, he tends to get just a little bit more irritated
Wind is
and
very slow today. Wind turbine
uh,
efficiency is not
fights
going to
back.
be that great.
And that's something, and that's where Gawker made a big mistake with Terry Hulk Hogan,
Warning,
is
a
they
new
went
wave of
after
hostile
somebody
winds is
who's
coming from a nearby
doesn't
nest.
have a reputation of taking slander and libel laying down. And they picked on somebody who has a reputation for hitting back as hard as he gets hit, if not harder. I mean, you have bad choices of people to target, and then there's targeting Hulk Hogan. It's not exactly on the list of brilliant ideas right there. All right, and that's I just really wanted to go into. No, it's am I actually in possession of emails or cell phone logs that would indicate collusion between Business Insider and the hit piece writer for Barstool Sports? Well, if I was in possession of that information, it would have already been turned over to a state's attorney general and would no longer be in my possession, and a state's attorney general would be free to do with it whatever they want to. Uh, so it's if that evidence is out there, it's probably already been handed over to law enforcement by people who, you know, have a vested interest in not being prats. That's another thing to consider here is one of the reasons why people like Matt Hartley and people like Ben Kay and people like uh, Peter Bright got found out, called out, and caught out is that there was enough actual legitimate writers who went, hang on, that's not right, what's going on here is wrong,
Wind is picking
and
up
then
again.
did something about it. And that's the real danger that Business Insider focuses, because uh, Business Insider, if you are picking targets for political purposes, and make no doubt, the hit piece on Barstool Sports was entirely political in nature and execution. There will be people who will take offense to that. There will be people who will notice that and will step up and do something about it. And will anything ever actually come of that? Will we see, I guess the big question is, will we see Barstool Sports take an anvil to um, to Business Insider like we saw uh, Terry Hulk Hogan take to Gawker Media? I don't know. I mean, I legitimately don't know. It would be nice uh, if the predatory practices of hiring hit piece writers specifically to write hit pieces was, discontinued, or there were greater incentives to not openly hire uh, writers whose entire reason is just to, can you make this story look bad? Will you write a story that you know is deliberately false? Or will you just publish whatever we put in front of you, regardless of what it says, regardless of whether or not it's accurate or inaccurate? And that's really where I wanted to end up with this, is a lot of the problems in the press industry aren't caused necessarily by writers who are unethical because they're unethical. And yes, there are a substantial number of problems that are caused by writers who are unethical and will do anything for a paycheck, but it's also writers who just want a job. And that's the real tragedy is, and this is coming from someone who at some point, while pursuing a job in press, I've often been told I'm too honest. I'm not trusted to toe the company line. I'm not the kind of person who will take a question and answer it in a way that makes the vendor look good. And, on one hand, it's kind of a little insulting, actually, is what if you make a good product, I don't have to lie. It's just telling the truth and pricing your component so that it's price competitive for what it is. That seems like a much better overall strategy. At least I would think it would be one. But to a lot of people, it's not. It's not what they want. It's not what's It's not what's a desirable hiring target. It doesn't fit the mold that's being looked for. Yeah, I know. I just put two healing towers really close together. Do I? It's sort of like realize I'm looping around and being recursive here. I'm part of it. It's because I am splitting attention here, and I'm partially annoyed, partially not surprised. Is rotten people do rotten things, and that there is a record that Business Insider was constructing a hit piece, looking for writers to implement a hit piece, interviewing people who, and talking to, communicating with, and leaving a communication trail of people who were required in order for the hit piece to be plausible, e.g., the police report. Well, for example, the police report that was posted. When you kind of have that going on, it's really, I think it's even more important to step back and really ask, what's the end goal? What's the point here? Why would somebody want to hit Barstool Sports? I mean, other than political reasons. And that's really what it is down to, is political reasons, a political hit job for a political purpose. And I don't really want to go too much into the political side of it. I want to just stick to the industry problem, industry expectations. And again, it's come for a lot of writers who are just getting started, just getting a job, even if it's repeating somebody else's puff piece. And that's a very strong occurrence in a number of cases. Is writers get a job not because they believe in it or they want to do it, but because they've got bills to pay, they need to put money on the table, and that job, while it might be rotten, may be the only reason they get to eat something that didn't come out of a canned food shelf for dinner. And that's really, I think, the tragedy overall, at least in regard to writing, is that independent journalism, being able to say something because it's true, or the art of being able to talk about something because it's accurate, has in some ways been regulated, or relegated, I think might be a more accurate term, entirely to the podcast and YouTube crowd, entirely to the Parler and Rumble crowd, entirely to people who aren't being directly paid on a day-to-day basis to write a story for a publication. Because the publications, the ones who are getting big press, the ones who are uh, have a number of pre-existing subscribers, they're not hiring people who are interested in posting the truth. They're not interested in talking with people or hiring people who are good at their job. What they're really interested in is somebody who can just do this, do that.
Warning. A new group of hostile creatures is coming from
And
a
that's
nearby nest.
really kind of depressing. Why don't I have any power here? And anyways, that's kind of... Okay, there we go. Now we got power. That was a little weird. And now we'll do a little armor up front.
I'm tracking a swarm of fast-moving objects across the sky. It's a meteor shower. Prepare for bombardment.
Alright, one here, one here. Anyways, that's kind of all I've really got to say, I think, for now. I think going to have to wait for some of this to shake out.
These rocks can do some serious damage. Evasive maneuvers, Mr. Riggs.
Okay, I got healing tower up. I'm going to get out of here. Get out of the blast zone. All right. We'll see where this goes over the next couple of days. See whether or not Barstool Sports has something a little more aggressive to do, because there's not only a strong case for libel and slander in regard to both the printed word and the commentary from various uh, parties unfamiliar with the business practices of Business Insider or the history of Business Insider's personnel. Uh, there's a lot of room for attack for Barstool Sports to make. And the ultimate, the reason I kind of just go down through all this history is consider the source. Is okay, I'm probably the worst example of this because so many of the articles I've written under ghost names. And this is where when I speak on the subject of hit pieces and where I speak on I've been told I'm too honest, I'm not trusted to live up to the party line. This is speaking from a place of experience. From I have been handed bumps before and say, we just need you to publish this. We just want you to do this. We don't want a fair and accurate review of our product. We just want you to repeat the press piece, and that's it. And I wasn't going to do that. I wasn't going to tell people a lie. I wasn't going to do things that I didn't think were accurate. And yeah, that cost me a lot of job opportunities. And yeah, I'm probably in a lot worse shape today than I would be if I had just sucked it up and said, you know what, I'll write whatever you want me to write. I'll say whatever you want me to say. But do I ever actually regret standing by what for me were my principles? Not really. And yeah, my life could be better. I could be in a lot less pain, but I'm still alive, so there's that. Uh, and that's where it's from the experience of being on the rotten side of the journalistic side. I get it. I get people who will post stuff because they need to put food on the table. They need to put food in their kid's mouth. They have a reason to write something that is demonstratively false. And for a long time, people can get away with that. But eventually, in every single case, it does catch up. Somebody does say, you shouldn't have done that. You shouldn't have recruited. This guy is not telling the truth. And those kind of reputations, when people become known for deliberately being deceptive and deliberately
New
lying,
technology has been developed.
it can be very, very hard to be taken seriously. And that's something that, as a writer, I have to keep in mind is I'm always judged by my previous, what I've written before, what I've said before. How accurate was it? Can I go back and say, okay, so I got that wrong? Or, okay, I didn't have enough information. Or maybe I had more information, but actions were taken on less information. And again, it's because of all the ghost written work I've done, a large body of work I've personally done is never going to be attributable to me. And at some point, I just have to live with that. As for tonight, though, we are coming up on 52 minutes, so I'm going to cut it here, and I'll catch you later.